Every week, this channel gives us one clear picture we can carry into Sabbath school. This week's picture is simple. The setback is never alone. Jesus is in the boat, even when he looks asleep. Romans 5 says it like this: tribulation produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. Character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out into our hearts. Hold that. Now, most of us have prayed through a hard season and felt nothing, heard nothing, wondered if God was even still listening. The silence got heavier than the trouble that started the prayer. By the time the season passed, if it has, we did not always know whether God carried us through it or whether we carried ourselves and called it His help. This week's lesson walks that question with the disciples in the storm, with Job in the silence, and with two grieving travelers on the Emmaus road. And the answer comes back the same way every time. The setback is never alone. He has not moved. He never did. Let's walk it. Before we walk a single day of this lesson, let's settle the sentence that holds the week together. The setback is never alone. The lesson gives us three witnesses to that truth. First, Mark chapter 4, a boat, a storm, disciples bailing water, and Jesus, asleep, on a cushion in the stern. Second, Job, an ash heap, unanswered questions, and a Redeemer Job cannot see, but refuses to release. Third, Luke chapter 24. Two travelers on the Emmaus road, walking with a stranger they do not yet recognize. One truth. Three witnesses. In the storm, the Master is in the boat. In the silence, the Redeemer still lives. On the road, the companion is walking beside us. The setback does not put us alone with our trouble. It reveals the one who has been there the whole time. Hold that sentence. The setback is never alone. Every day this week comes back to it. The Sabbath afternoon introduction opens with a small parable the lesson asks us to feel before we walk the week. A young girl is caught in a sudden storm. Rain is coming sideways. The wind is loud. Other children run for cover. She does not run. She turns her face up into the wet sky, closes her eyes against the drops, and smiles. Someone asks her later why she smiled. She says, very simply, "I thought God was taking my picture," end quote, unquote. That is not a complete theology of suffering. It is a child's instinct to look up instead of deciding God has looked away. And that is the reframe the lesson is pressing toward. Most of us were taught, often without anyone saying it directly, that hardship means God has stepped back. That if we were good enough, the rain would stop. The little girl gives us a simpler starting place. Maybe the storm is not proof that God has turned away. Maybe the storm is one more place where we have to learn He is still near. Not to deny the storm, to reread what the storm means. Sunday takes us into Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41. It has been a long day of teaching. The crowds have finally thinned. Jesus turns to the disciples and says, "Let us cross over to the other side." They climb into the boat. The Sea of Galilee is wide and shallow and famous for sudden squalls, the kind that drop out of the surrounding hills with no warning. They are perhaps halfway across when the wind hits. The waves begin breaking over the sides of the boat. The disciples, several of them lifelong fishermen who have known this lake all their lives, start to panic. Read carefully what the lesson asks us to notice first. Jesus did not avoid the storm. Jesus led them into it. The crossing was His idea. The destination was His decision. The squall caught them in the middle of an obedience, not a disobedience. This matters because most of us assume the storm means we took a wrong turn. The lesson is telling us sometimes the storm hits in the middle of doing exactly what Jesus said to do. The wind is not always proof we are off the path. Sometimes the wind is the path, and the one who set the course is still in the boat. Mark chapter 4, verse 38. The disciples wake Jesus. Listen carefully to what they say. "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" That is not a polite request. That is an accusation. They are not asking, "Are you able?" They are asking, "Do you actually care?" They have decided in the middle of the storm that the one asleep in the back of the boat must not be paying attention, or must not love them enough, or both. Read it twice. That is our question too. Most of us have prayed something like that in our own storms. Maybe not out loud. Maybe just in a quiet sentence to ourselves at 3 a.m. Do you actually care? Are you actually here? Because if you were, this would not be happening like this. The lesson asks us to notice what Jesus does next. He does not rebuke them for the question. He does not lecture them about the disrespect. He does not list the miracles they should have remembered. He gets up. He stands in the boat. He speaks one sentence to the storm. "Peace, be still," and the wind dies. The water flattens. And then he asks them a different question. "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" That question is not condemned. That question is heard. He answered it. And he answers ours. Now hold the picture quietly for a moment before we move on. Because Sunday wants us to see something we usually rush past. Jesus was in the boat that was filling with water, the boat that looked like it was going down. He was right there in the back of it, on a cushion, sleeping, not on the shore watching from a distance, not in another boat, not in heaven somewhere, in the boat. Asleep, yes, but not absent. The same boat that held the panic also held the peace. Both at the same time. The disciples could not see that until the storm stopped. We rarely can either. But the picture stays. When the storm hits us, the diagnosis, the phone call, the grief, the quiet years of waiting for something that never arrives, the setback is never alone. Jesus may seem asleep. He is never absent. The boat is not empty. He is right there in the back of it. The same Christ who slept through the wind is the Christ who can speak peace to it. He does not always answer on our timing. He does not always calm the water in the way we expected. But he does not abandon the boat he chose to enter. He has been in the boat the whole time. And if this kind of weekly walkthrough helps us walk into Sabbath school prepared, subscribe so next week's lesson finds us too. Every week, one clear picture for the lesson. Now let's keep walking. Monday turns to Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 34. A woman in the crowd. 12 years of hemorrhaging. 12 years of doctors who could not help. 12 years of being ritually unclean, which in her culture meant she could not touch another person, attend the synagogue, or be embraced by her own family. 12 years of being completely alone with a setback that would not lift. She hears Jesus is in town. She makes a decision the lesson asks us to notice carefully. She does not stand at the edge of the road and hope he looks her way. She does not wait politely until everyone else has been seen. She pushes. into the press, through the elbows, through the dust, through the people who would have shoved her back if they had known she was unclean. She moves with intention. She has decided that if she can just reach the hem of his robe, that will be enough. She does not drift past him. She pushes through to him. The lesson asks us to put that posture next to our own setbacks. Are we drifting near Jesus? Or are we pushing through to him? Both look similar from the outside. They are different on the inside. The first hopes. The second reaches. Mark continues. She reaches. Her fingers brush the edge of his garment. And immediately, Mark uses that word, immediately, she knew in her body that the bleeding had stopped. 12 years. Stopped in an instant. Then comes the small moment the lesson wants us to feel. Jesus turns around in the crowd and asks, "Who touched my clothes?" The disciples are bewildered. "Look at this crowd, teacher, everyone is touching you." But Jesus knew the difference. Many had brushed against him. One had reached for him. The crowd was casual. She was specific. He felt the difference. That distinction matters for setbacks. Plenty of us are physically near a Sunday morning church service. Plenty of us are intellectually near the doctrines. Plenty of us are emotionally near the songs. Only some of us are actually reaching. The woman did not reach because she had perfect theology. She reached because she had run out of options and decided to bet what was left of her hope on this teacher. He honored that. He turned around. He looked her in the eye. He said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Daughter. Not stranger. The word the Father uses for the kept ones. She had been alone with her setback for 12 years. He named her family in one sentence. Monday closes by setting Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 and 29, next to the woman's reach. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Read that slowly. Come to me. Not come to a system. Not come to a doctrine. Come to a person. All who labor, that is, anyone carrying weight. All who are heavy laden, that is, anyone bowed down by what life has piled on. Anyone. Not the people with strong faith. Not the people with clean records. Not the people who deserve it. Anyone. The invitation is open. The yoke he offers is his own, and he carries the other end. The lesson is asking us to take him at his word. The boat is open. The hem is reachable. The invitation is for now. Not after we have our act together. Now, whatever has been pressing on us, go to him. Reach. Push through if we have to. He has been waiting for the touch the whole time. Tuesday takes us into the hardest book in the Bible. Job. Read with us the speed of his losses in chapter 1. A messenger runs in. The Sabaeans attacked. Your oxen and donkeys are gone. The servants are dead. I alone escaped to tell you. While he is still speaking, another messenger arrives. Fire fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the shepherds. I alone escaped to tell you. While he is speaking, another. The Chaldeans raided. Your camels are gone. The servants are dead. I alone escaped to tell you. And while he is speaking, read the word slowly. A fourth messenger arrives. Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine at their oldest brother's house. A great wind from the wilderness struck the four corners of the house, and it collapsed on them, and they are dead. I alone escaped to tell you. In a single afternoon, Job lost his wealth, his servants, his livestock, his entire family. Within days, he would lose his health. His skin covered in sores from head to foot, sitting in the ashes, scraping himself with a piece of broken pottery. Job lost everything that could be lost, except the one who could not be lost. The lesson asks us to sit with the weight of his afternoon before we move forward. Some setbacks are not small. Some setbacks take everything. The book of Job exists in the Bible because God did not pretend they did not. Job chapter 1, verse 21. Job stands up, tears his robe in mourning, shaves his head, an ancient sign of profound grief, and then falls to the ground. The lesson asks us to listen carefully to what he says. Not in some second draft after he has thought about it. In the moment, with his children freshly buried and his life freshly burned to the ground. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Read that twice. That is not denial. That is not pretending the loss does not hurt. That is worship under weight. Job is not saying the loss does not matter. He is saying the one who allowed it is still the one who is worthy. He is not numb. He is not stoic. He is grieving the torn robe and the shaved head, and the body collapsed in the dust prove it. He is also worshiping. The two are not in conflict. Worship and grief can sit in the same body at the same time. That is one of the hardest lessons in the entire Bible. We do not have to be done grieving before we can worship. We can worship through the grief. Job did. And it changed nothing about his loss. And it changed everything about his soul. Then come the friends. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar. They hear of Job's losses. They travel from their own homes to come comfort him. The first thing they do is right. They sit with him in silence for 7 days. They mourn with him without speaking. That is good. That is the early shape of real compassion. But then they start to talk, and their compassion turns. They begin to suspect that hardship like this must mean Job has done something wrong. There must be hidden sin. The only way the losses make sense to them is if Job deserves them. Otherwise, their whole theology cracks. So they keep pressing. Confess. Repent. Stop hiding the sin that must be there. The lesson asks us to recognize this voice because it sounds modern. Most of us have been Job for someone, and most of us have been the friend. The voice that cannot sit with mystery. The voice that needs the suffering to have a clean cause, because clean causes are easier to live near. Job pushes back. He is not perfect, but he is honest. He says, I have not done what you are accusing me of. And my losses are not the simple math you want them to be. The book of Job will spend 35 chapters refusing to give the friends their tidy answer. Because real setbacks rarely come with tidy answers. Compassion that cannot sit with mystery becomes accusation. The lesson is asking us to be a better friend. Then Job says something the Christian church has carried in its memory for almost 4,000 years. Job chapter 19, verses 25 through 27. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and he shall stand at last on the earth. And after my skin is destroyed, this I know, that in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. How my heart yearns within me. Read that slowly. In the middle of the worst losses any honest believer in the Old Testament had ever faced, sitting in his ashes, sores covering his body, his children buried, his friends accusing him, Job stands up in his sentence and says it. I know. My Redeemer lives. My Redeemer will stand on the earth. After my skin is destroyed, I will still see God with my own eyes. Job did not need the wreckage explained to know the Redeemer lived. He did not have the gospel as we have it. He did not have the cross to look back on. He had only a long obedience and a long darkness, and a stubborn, holy refusal to stop trusting the one he had not stopped knowing. The clarity that came to him in the ash heap is one of the brightest moments in the Old Testament. Setbacks do not silence faith. Sometimes they amplify it. Sometimes the strongest sentences in the whole Bible come out of the deepest pain. Tuesday closes with another sentence from Job. Chapter 23, verses 8 through 12. Listen carefully. This is the honesty the lesson does not want us to miss. Look, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he works on the left hand, I cannot behold him. When he turns to the right hand, I cannot see him. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. Read that again. Forward, Job looks. Backward, Job looks. Left, Job looks. Right, Job looks. And he is not there. Job admits it. He cannot perceive God. He cannot behold God. He cannot see God in any direction he turns. The silence is real. The hiddenness is real. Job does not pretend otherwise. And then he says, but he knows the way that I take. Not, but I know where he is. Job does not know. Job is honest about not knowing. But Job knows that he is known. That is faith in the dark. The disciples in the storm could not see Jesus' care in the boat. Job could not see the Redeemer in the ash heap. But the setback was not alone. The master they could not see was the master who was there. He has not moved. Wednesday opens on the afternoon of the resurrection. Luke chapter 24, verse 13. Two disciples, one named Cleopas, one unnamed, are walking from Jerusalem to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles away. They are leaving the city of the crucifixion. They are grieving. The cross was 3 days ago. The empty tomb has been reported, but they do not yet know what to make of it. As they walk, they talk over everything that has happened. Read what the lesson asks us to notice. Their greatest setback was not that something hard had happened to them. Their greatest setback was that the one they had loved was dead. The teacher they had given up everything to follow. The Messiah they had hoped would redeem Israel. The friend who had healed and taught and called them by name. They had buried him. And with him, they had buried their picture of how the story was supposed to end. They are not just grieving a death. They are grieving a misunderstanding of God's plan. They had read the prophets one way. The cross had read them another. The lesson asks us to sit with that for a moment. Some setbacks are practical. Some are spiritual. The hardest kind is when our picture of God breaks. That is where the Emmaus disciples are walking when the road meets them. Luke chapter 24, verses 15 through 17. While they were walking, talking, working through the wreckage of the last week, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. He did not announce himself. He did not interrupt the grief. He drew near, and he went with them. Read the next sentence carefully. but their eyes were restrained, so that they did not know him. The eyes, not the road, not the Jesus, the eyes. Something in their perception was held back. The companion was there. The grief blocked the recognition. He asks them very simply, "What kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad?" And they stop. Cleopas turns to him, to this stranger they think is a fellow traveler, and asks, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem, and have you not known the things which happened there in these days?" And he asks back gently, "What things?" Read that again. The companion, who knew every detail, asks them to tell him. He does not correct them. He does not stop their telling. He invites it. Their eyes were restrained. He was not. The lesson wants us to feel that. Setbacks restrain our eyes. They do not move him. He is still walking. He is still listening. He is asking to hear what we have to say about our losses, even when he could have explained the whole story in a single sentence. He chose the walk first. Then comes the moment the lesson wants us to feel. Luke chapter 24, verses 25 through 27. After the two disciples finish telling him their grief, he answers, "Not with sympathy, with Scripture. O foolish ones, and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ to have suffered these things, and to enter into his glory?" And then, beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded to them in all the Scriptures the things concerning himself. Read that twice. He walks them through the entire Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Isaiah, Daniel, showing them verse by verse that the cross was not a misunderstanding. The cross was the plan. The cross was prophesied. The cross was the only way the rescue could happen. Their hearts begin to burn within them. Verse 32, they will say later, "Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us on the road, and while he opened the Scriptures to us?" They still did not recognize him. Their eyes were still restrained. But something deeper was happening. The stranger was rebuilding their picture of God. He was showing them that the setback they thought had ended the story was actually the story. And the heat in their chest was the truth catching fire. Sometimes Jesus walks with us long before we recognize him. Sometimes the heart knows before the eyes do. Quick note before we keep walking. If this picture is helping the setback is never alone, drop one word in the comments: boat, road, or silence. Tell us which place we are walking through this week. The pinned comment below has the lesson links and a free weekly Sabbath companion note for anyone who would like one. Now, back to the lesson. Thursday's reading turns to a passage Ellen White recorded in early writings, a vision the lesson asks us to read carefully. In the vision, someone is in deep despair. The path forward is a steep, narrow climb. The traveler is invited to see Jesus. But to make the climb, they must lay down their possessions at the base. Everything they have been clinging to has to be set on the ground. They begin the climb with empty hands. At the top, they are brought into the presence of Jesus. And what they discover there is what the lesson wants us to feel. Jesus knows their entire story. Every detail. Every disappointment. Every moment of dryness. Every quiet prayer in the dark. He has not missed any of it. He looks at them, not past them, and says 2 words. "Fear not," and he smiles. The smile changes everything. Their picture of God up to that moment had been built out of every dark season they had lived through. Now his actual face replaces all of it. The grief and confusion that had piled up between them and him melts in front of his real countenance. Ellen White is doing something here that the whole lesson is doing. She is telling us setbacks distort our picture of God. The remedy is not better arguments. The remedy is seeing his actual face. When we see him as he actually is, the setback rereads itself. Thursday brings us to two of the most quoted verses in the New Testament, and the lesson wants us to read them carefully because they are often quoted carelessly. Romans chapter 8, verse 18. I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. Read that twice. Paul is not saying our suffering does not matter. He is not saying we should not weep. He is saying the suffering, real, heavy, weighty as it is going to be outweighed by something coming, by a glory whose mass will be so much greater than the mass of our sorrow that the comparison will not even be possible. Then verse 28. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Read that carefully. Paul does not say all things are good. He does not say cancer is good. He does not say bereavement is good. He does not say the betrayal is good. He says all things work together for good. The verb is the work. God works. He takes the broken pieces, the things that are not good, and weaves them into something that ends in good. The setback itself may not be redeemed inside this life. The setback inside the larger story will be God works all things, not just the good ones. All. That is the promise. Thursday closes with a quiet sentence the lesson keeps coming back to. Setbacks distort our picture of God. We start to read his face through the lens of what has gone wrong. We picture him as distracted, or absent, or harsh, or asleep on the cushion and not waking up in time. The remedy is not better theology. The remedy is the cross. The cross is the real face of God. When we want to know whether he cares, we do not consult our season, we consult Calvary. When we want to know whether he sees us, we do not consult the silence, we consult the empty tomb. The cross does not erase the setback. It rereads it. It tells us the one who could not look away from us at our worst is not now looking away from us at our hardest. He climbed into the boat. He walked the road. He sat in the ash heap. He hung on the cross. He has been in every dark place we will ever sit. And he has come out the other side of all of them. The real face of God smiles at the broken climber and says, "Fear not, that is who he is." The setback distorts. The cross corrects. Beholding his real face is the path home. Friday's section gives us several discussion questions. The lesson wants us to sit with, not solve, sit with. We will name a few. First, how has our setback reshaped our picture of God? Read that slowly. Most of us have a picture of God that was at least partly built by what happened in our hardest seasons. What does that picture look like now? Is it accurate? Or has the season distorted it? Second, when did we last actively pray for God's voice to overcome the enemies? Because there are voices in every setback. The voice of accusation. The voice of fear. The voice of suspicion. Have we asked him to overcome those voices in us? Third, is our heart humble? Do we trust God's sovereignty despite the hardship? Read that one carefully. Trust does not require understanding. Trust requires posture. Fourth, Are we grounded daily in God's Word? Not just on Sabbath. Daily. Where the slow, steady seeing of His face happens. These are not rhetorical. The lesson is asking us to actually sit with them. Maybe this week. Maybe with a friend. Maybe alone with our Bible open. The lesson does not give us tidy answers. It gives us honest questions. The kind that change us if we will let them. The lesson invites us to sit with one more verse before the week closes. Romans chapter 8, verse 26. Likewise, the Spirit also helps in our weaknesses. For we do not know what we should pray for as we ought, but the Spirit Himself makes intercession for us with groanings which cannot be uttered. Read that twice. We do not know what we should pray for as we ought. Paul is naming what every honest believer in a setback has felt. The prayer that will not come out right. The words that keep dying in our throat before they reach the ceiling. The blank silence where the prayer should be. He does not call that a failure of faith. He calls it weakness, the kind of weakness that comes from being human, not from being unfaithful. And then he says the gentlest thing. The Spirit Himself makes intercession for us, with groanings which cannot be uttered. In the seasons when we cannot find the words, the Spirit prays them for us. From inside us, with sighs too deep for language. We are not praying alone in our setbacks. The Spirit is praying with us, and sometimes for us, when we have nothing left. That is the comfort the lesson wants us to carry into Sabbath. The prayer is not gone. The prayer is just on the lips of someone closer to us than our own breath. Friday closes with the inside story. A man named Zeth. He lives in Indonesia. Right after his baptism, he sat down with his wife and made a plan. He would pray daily with her for their relatives. He would visit them. He would offer Bible studies. He would invite them to evangelistic meetings. In the first year, 13 relatives were baptized, including his own sister. Then, 5 more siblings later. He served as a literature evangelist, sailing between Indonesian islands. Then, COVID hit. The lockdown closed the islands. He could have stopped. Most of us would have. Instead, he became a volunteer Bible worker. He and his wife built a 50-person prayer list. He started visiting 3 families a day on a motorcycle with his 2 small children riding along. Imagine that picture. The motorcycle weaving through Indonesian streets. 2 small children. A man going to pray with people on a 50-person list. Today, 14% of that list have been baptized. Many more are still in Bible study. He is currently studying theology at Klabat University. The setback, the lockdown, the isolation, the slow results did not stop the mission. It changed the shape of the mission. The setback was not alone. Grace kept arriving in the new shape. That is what persistence in a setback looks like. Not always dramatic. Sometimes just a motorcycle and 2 children and a 50-person list. Now return to the memory verse. Romans chapter 5, verses 3 through 5. We also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. Now hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who was given to us. Read it slowly this time. Tribulation produces perseverance. Tribulation does the work. Perseverance produces character. The sticking with produces who we become. Character produces hope. Who we become produces what we expect. And hope, Paul says, does not disappoint. The chain has a destination. The path through the setback is the path that produces hope. Not the path around the setback. The path through. God did not promise us a road without storms. He promised that the storms would not be empty. He promised the path would produce something. He promised hope at the end of the walk. And He poured out the love that does not run dry to carry us all the way. That is the lesson. The setback is never alone. The love of God has already been poured into the heart that has to walk through it. Now bring the whole week together into the sentence we started with. The setback is never alone. The boat teaches it. In the storm, the Master is asleep in the stern. The disciples thought He did not care. He was in the boat the whole time. Job teaches it. In the silence, the Redeemer is still living even when Job cannot find Him in any direction he turns. Emmaus teaches it. On the road, the companion walks unrecognized beside grieving disciples who think the story is over. One truth. 3 witnesses. The Master we cannot see is the Master who is there. Sometimes He seems asleep through the wind. Sometimes He walks the road in a face we do not recognize. Sometimes He lets us cling in the silence without explaining. But the setback is not empty. The road is not lonely. The silence is not abandoned. Tribulation produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character. Character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint because the love of God has been poured out into our hearts. That is the class sentence. The setback is never alone. A small preview of where next week's lesson takes us. Lesson 12 is called Share Him. After weeks of receiving prayer, faith, law and gospel, repentance and forgiveness, and now setbacks, the lesson turns outward. What we have received is meant to be carried to someone else. Zeth's story today is a preview. The setback was not alone, and neither are the people God is asking us to reach. Next week, we begin to ask what it means to step into someone else's boat, walk beside someone on their road, and help them see the Christ who has been near all along. Now picture one last scene before we close. The 2 disciples have reached Emmaus. The road is behind them. The afternoon has turned to evening. They invite the stranger to stay for supper. He agrees. They go inside. They sit down at a small wooden table. A clay lamp is lit. The bread is brought out. And the moment the lesson wants us to feel arrives. The stranger reaches across the table. He takes the loaf. He blesses it the way the Master used to bless it. He breaks it the way the Master used to break it. He hands it to them the way the Master used to hand it to them. And the candlelight catches his hands as he passes them the bread. And they see the scars. The recognition comes like sunrise. It is Him. It has always been Him. He has been with them all day. The road they thought they were walking alone, they were walking with the risen Christ the whole time. And in the second their eyes open, He vanishes from their sight. He has stayed long enough. They look at each other across the broken bread. And one of them says, "Did not our heart burn within us while He talked with us on the road? Did not our heart burn?" That is the picture. The setback was never alone. He had been listening. He had been bearing the road with them. They just had not recognized Him yet. One day, we will look back at our own road, our own storm, our own silence, and we will see more than we could see while we were walking. The road may have felt empty. It was not. He was there. So walk into class this Sabbath with one sentence. The setback is never alone. In the boat, on the road, in the silence, Christ is there before we recognize Him. That is Sabbath School Lesson 11. If we want to revisit last week's lesson on repentance and forgiveness, the full deep dive walkthrough of Lesson 10 is linked in the description below. The 15-minute recap is there too, if we are short on time. And the recap of this week's lesson, Lesson 11, in 15 minutes, is coming Wednesday. Subscribe to the Verse Atlas with the bell on so it finds us before next Sabbath. If this study helped us today, a like helps other Adventists find it too. Before we go, drop one word in the comments: boat, road, or silence. Which place are we walking through this week? The pinned comment below has the lesson links, plus a free weekly Sabbath School companion note for anyone who would like one quiet page each Wednesday to help walk into Sabbath prepared. Pray for the lesson this week. Pray for the class. Pray for the people who teach. And if the prayer will not come, remember Romans 8, verse 26. The Spirit prays with groanings too deep for words. The setback is never alone. God bless your Sabbath.